right now in the United States and in the West, we can be publicly who we are. And although, yes, we are Christians, but if you look at our history and better understand it, you will see that a lot of the things that were looked at negatively by the West, they're considered very sophisticated, very philosophical, very advanced. It's the total opposite, and it's all because of the perception.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of the Spiritual Inspired Show. I am your host, Claudiu Murgan. For older episodes, please visit spiritualinspired.ca, gnostictv.com, our YouTube channel. And for purchasing my books, you can visit soulawakeningstore.com. My guest today is very special because I've never had anyone up until this point with her background, Weam Namou. Weam, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I said that you have a very distinct background. You were born in Iraq, and you have a Chaldean Christian background. And I want to start with that idea. I want to know, what is the difference from your perspective, of course, between the Chaldean Christian and Orthodox Christian or Christianity?
Well, Chaldeans are the indigenous people of Iraq. They're Neo-Babylonians who still speak Aramaic, the language of Jesus. They're Catholics, and we were part of the Eastern Church, and we united with Rome. Several times we tried to unite. So there's a lot of different theological reasons that has a very long story. However, we were prior to even the first century, this is when we embraced Christianity, when St. Thomas the Apostle was passing through Mesopotamia to go to India. And as he spread the gospel, the Chaldeans were, among other groups, were in that region, and they embraced the religion. And I think it was partly or mostly because they were already very spiritual. If you look at their ways, even prior to Christianity, they were astrologers, mathematicians, scholars. So they were already working with nature, and they were with the higher powers. And when the idea of what Jesus was doing to them, that probably felt so natural, more so the fact, Jesus said, "You can do things greater than I." And I believe that that was their own philosophy as well. They were creators, and they knew how to choreograph energy. And I believe that it's their spirituality that has helped them persevere despite all the oppression and a lot of the genocides that they endured over the decades.
And you mentioned two keywords, Aramaic and Jesus, Yeshua. And I know you speak Aramaic. Have you had the curiosity and the chance to look at all the writings and confirm that indeed not only Thomas, but Jesus crossed Egypt on his way to India?
I have taken classes with Aramaic, and so I'm good at reading the Lord's Prayer. So I've gone that far, being able to write and read the Lord's Prayer. Regarding his journey to India, I have not looked deeply into that. However, my first spiritual teacher was a man from India. And that was one of the stories that he would share with me, although he shared it with a lot of confirmation. And I know that in one of the writings about St. Thomas, it is also again discussed about how he did journey to India. But I have not looked into it as deeply as I can share with you right now.
Yes, thank you. And I didn't mention that, in fact, you are a movie director, a writer, a podcaster. You have so many talents. And I would like to know how this background we just mentioned shape your storytelling and artistic voice.
Well, initially, all I wanted to do was write books. So that was just my love that I'm gonna, and I knew that it was in my fate to, in my destiny to write books. However, very early on, my teachers, whether editors and publishers or agents, they were particularly interested in my background more than I was. I was just Chaldean. So it was like, okay, what's so big deal about that? They said, oh, no, no, there is something interesting about that. Little did I know my own heritage. The reason being, again, because of all the oppression and the attempts to erase our identity. And that was because of the misunderstanding about who Chaldeans are, plus because they did embrace Christianity. So they became Christians, and we lived in a Muslim country. So there was more an attempt constantly for Arabianization of that region. So when I was little, I knew I was Christian, and I knew I was Chaldean. I really didn't understand what being Chaldean was until I came to the United States. And until I started understanding what being Chaldean is, but I didn't understand the history of it until when I was working in the literary arena, and I found like everybody was interested in this topic that again seemed just so natural to me. Like, doesn't everybody know about Chaldeans? Um, so I started writing about it. I wrote really some semi-autobiographical like novels, and the first novel, Chaldean American novel, was my book, The Feminine Art, and that was released in 2004. And guess what happened as soon as it was released? I had over 100 interviews within like a couple of months. And nobody, well, one person asked me about my novel, but nobody else asked. Nobody cared. They said, "Oh, what was it like being a Chaldean in Iraq? Living under Hussein's regime, being a Christian in a Muslim country." So I thought, "Oh my goodness, they're asking me things, half of which I'm not really quite sure. Half of the other things just were again so natural to me." So I was responding to these questions, and in the process, I found, oh my goodness, the first writer in recorded history is Enheduanna, a woman from ancient Mesopotamia. She was a princess, a priestess, and the first recorded writer because she was the first one to sign her name to her poetry. So I thought, wait, like, how come I never learned about this? Well, we didn't really learn in the school system that I grew up in. We didn't learn about things that predated 1400 years ago. And so I started to discover my own heritage here in the process of these interviews. So then my writing started taking a shift over time, going from novels that wrote about our culture and heritage and just really focusing on the storytelling part to more nonfiction. And still the storytelling continued. I think that I really believe it was in my past life that I didn't finish some of the stories that need to continue because I have discovered that Chaldeans were very prolific writers and they continued this writing. This is how they kept, part of the way that they kept their history is by writing a lot. I mean, we have a woman in the 1800s, Maria Theresa Esmar, who was a prolific writer. She wrote a two-part memoir that's almost 700 pages. And she was born in my ancestral village of Tilkief, which was destroyed by ISIS in 2014. And she traveled alone in the 1800s to the Middle East and Europe and wrote about it. And Queen Victoria sponsored her work. And her whole purpose, which is part of our heritage, is that whether you are talented, whether you're a writer or a doctor or a lawyer, whatever you are, whatever God-given talents you're given, they have to be used for a higher purpose to serve. And so my writing started shaping its way. It became first of like, I'm sharing these stories, and that's so exciting, to more so that, oh, I am, I'm keeping our heritage alive by doing this. And not only that, but I am sharing a heritage that has so much to offer that attempts were made to bury it, but it continues, its energy continues to revive itself thousands of miles away. So understanding the importance of that, my understanding that my writing had a form of service and became more important to me. And you know, there's a healing that happens in that process, in those sharing of these stories, which we will talk about as we continue, because I know this is a little bit of a different topic.
Yes, and how strong is the Chaldean community in Iraq after so much turmoil?
You know, currently Michigan has the largest population of Chaldeans in the world.
Wow.
Before 2014, we were the second largest. We have the second largest population, Iraq being the first. Unfortunately, because of what happened with ISIS, it has weakened a great deal. So, like the town where my ancestors are from, which was the largest town for Chaldeans, it's completely destroyed, and people have not returned to it. Before the 2003 war, there was about 1.5 million Chaldeans, and now there's less than 150,000. And Michigan has 200,000, but that's the recent census, but that's not calculating the people that have not, filled in the census as Chaldeans, and it's not including also people who marry sometimes non-Chaldeans and then they don't, so they have intermarriages. So we believe it's closer to probably like 250,000 just here in
Wow.
Michigan.
Oh, interesting. And staying on the ancient history, we all know about the mystery schools in Egypt. Do you know if the Chaldeans had something similar? Also, the Greeks had something like that, the Essenes in the Palestine-Israel area. Do your community, or have your community had something like that as well?
I think what happened to the Chaldeans, unfortunately, because of the region that it's in and because of them being considered pagans or having pagan teachings, so there was an attempt to kind of distance themselves, people to distance, or religions, people to distance themselves from Chaldeans. But there was like Julian the Chaldean. What they did is they wrote books that highlighted their spirituality, and that was very important for people to read, to see how they, again, with choreographing energy, and people considered them magicians. Now imagine in that former in the former region, those words were looked at with negative connotations, whereas today when we talk about these, we'll probably say I just created magic, or this is so magical, and now the term has a different meaning to it. So they had to be in hiding. They could not publicly be who they are. Right now in the United States and in the West, we can be publicly who we are. And although, yes, we are Christians, but if you look at our history and better understand it, you will see that a lot of the things that were looked at negatively by the West, they're considered very sophisticated, very philosophical, very advanced. It's the total opposite, and it's all because of the perception, some of the negative perceptions that were associated. Interestingly, though, the Greeks and the Romans didn't have a lot of them. They didn't have that kind of negative impression on them. They called them astronomers, astrologers, mathematicians. They gave them very high titles, and they gave them credit for a lot of the work that later the Westerners learned and continued.
Yes, interesting. And I know 2025 is an important year for you because you launch a movie, Pomegranate, which is deeply rooted in your experience of immigration, identity, and faith. What inspired you to turn your novel into a film, and what did your audience feel about the movie?
So Pomegranate started because of the 2016 elections. So people were going at it like crazy, just, having it out with each other politically. So you had the conservatives against the liberals. And I was just sitting there watching the situation and I tried to get involved just a little bit. I didn't go too far because I'm not a very aggressive person. So I backed out very quickly and said, okay, um, I don't like how where this is heading because I came from that kind of region where you could not politically have a political debate. We left Iraq because of that, because of the pressure to be on one side or the other. And I did not like seeing that happening here in the United States, where the very country we came here so we can have those freedoms. So, what I like to do, and what I've learned to do over the years, is to utilize my energy to create something positive from the experience that I'm witnessing. So, I turned this into a story, and this story had a lot of like truth actually to it. That's what it had. the it's a Muslim liberal family living across the street of a conservative Chaldean family. And the main characters are two young women, both very beautiful, both very smart, independent thinkers, and they have a different belief system. And they hash it out by being authentic and really telling one another what they feel about whether it's their religion or their political views. And I think that we can all just do that, just hash it out, have a conversation, and guess what? Then get beyond it. So that was really what started me to focus, to put my energies into the story. In the process, I did a lot of research to try to understand both sides. And I realized, if we really research why each side thinks the way it does, you can kind of see where they're coming from. The best part, I gotta tell you, is when we were shooting the film and the whole crew, when we would say quiet on the set, action, the whole crew would have to be silent. And during that time, we actually listened to each other through the dialogue that these characters were saying. And I think this was healing people and making them learn and informing them in certain ways. Now, the script, it was chosen as quarterfinalist for Francis Coppola's Zoetrope. And after that, that was kind of like the first blessing that opened the door where I started having people reaching out to me and wanting to collaborate. And through the process, we ended up getting Scott Rosenfeld, the producer of Home Alone, as our executive producer. And then from then on, it just took a life of its own. It also, aside from the political aspect, it's about women empowerment. We need a little bit of that in the Middle East. We need it everywhere, but we need a lot of it in the Middle East. And I hope and I pray that it does that, it delivers that.
And there were any specific cinematic techniques did you use to communicate, internal conflict, belonging, or exile in the movie?
So, in preparing and pre-production, I had the script. The script had already won awards, and I had the script, and we got the actors and everything. And what I did is, one of the people, he was actually my film my instructor in film school. And he was working with me and he said, the best way to prepare for this, I had already, by the way, directed a feature documentary, but not a narrative where I'm working with actors. And so I was, and that one also won an awards, and the film and the book won an Eric Hoffer Award. So he was giving me tips and he said, you know what, I think the best thing to do is to read this book on directing and that book on directing. I said, okay. And I remember the first book I got, it wasn't really telling me what I needed to learn. I didn't feel I was learning that much from it. And then I said, wait a minute. I majored in communication. I already directed a film. I have tons of nieces and nephews that come to me. I know how to communicate to them. And I said, I think the best way for me to better understand the story and the emotions that the actors that I want them to portray is by writing a book. I wrote the book after the script. I wrote it for the sake of me better grasping what the setting, everything that I wanted to portray. Because with the script, you are very limited. You have to be you have to kind of be more stingy with words to get your message across. I love books. I love to elaborate on the feelings and the settings and everything else. And I wrote the book and I had the actors read it. And when they came here, they were so talented. They're so beautiful. They really fit in. I trusted them and I communicated well with them, and they had done their homework and they read the book. I think that was part of it making the process easier for all of us. We all better understood the story. Even my editor read the book, the cinematographer, the producer. I think it helped all of us to get a better grasp on the story.
And is there any chance for the movie to be distributed in Iraq as well?
I hope so. I do hope. I think the Western world has been very, and India and other countries has been very generous. It's won over 50 awards. I really have lost count of the awards. I know it's either close to 50 or at least or over 50. And I think none have been from the Arab world. So I think they are still maybe I know a lot of the people from the Arab communities have seen it. And it might be bringing up mirrors for them that I'm not sure. I think that they're ready to see, but I don't know that they're ready to support. Interestingly, the film, all the cast, all the Muslim family is all Muslim. Our lead character is Muslim. They're Iraqis. And now I did not plan this. I believe that if you're a great actor, you can play any role. But it was when we were calling them out, I learned of their background literally the day of their audition, because we would say, okay, can you tell us? I would just like say, hey, she looks like she fits into that role. This person looks like, and then while they were auditioning, they would tell us about their background, and I found out that they were Iraqi background, except the brother, even though he's Muslim, but he's Palestinian background. And the Chaldeans were all Chaldeans. So, so and when they all said, we interviewed all of them about this, and they said this is the story they've been wanting. They feel like there was so much stereotypes around the Middle Eastern people, whether it's with their stories, with everything. I mean, how many stories do you find where you are able to fall in love with the characters because they're funny and they're deep and they're honest and they're beautiful? How many experience do we have with the Middle Eastern culture? We hardly have that. It's either they're victims, and who wants to be a victim? I mean, would you be inspired about seeing a character who's a victim, or they're terrorists? Now, would you be inspired by being a terrorist? So we're more than that. We are multidimensional. Yes, we have a dark side like everybody else, but we have a beautiful side as well. And I think for us, our own community has to understand that we have to embrace all of that in order for our authentic self to show. We can't just show that we are these great people. We're people, we're humans. We have our faults, but we also have great things that the world needs to see. And I hope that the whole entire world gets to see it, because it's for them. It's for the world, to share in its beauty.
Yes, I agree. And you mentioned the movie could be a mirror. And I know, and you also know that there is so much distraction and trauma in this world these days, and people are afraid to speak out or speak to those close to them and share the trauma, share what they went through, maybe early in life, or what they are going through right now. And having this type of movie that portrays feelings and real life events could be a discharge for them, a way to, start crying, start identifying issues they have in their own life. Because I see people who are not necessarily I see the requests from people who need help, either with anger management, either with life purpose. various motives which are psychologically related. And we all go through as a collective through this trauma. And if we have this type of mirrors, I think will be easy for us to discharge these blockages, remove the energy that is stuck in our body and makes us feel like we are sick.
Eh, yeah, so one of the things, like Scott Rosenfeld, I remember he was already interested in the film, but when he read it, he said, I was so surprised by the humor. Now, what we tend to do, we take ourselves way too seriously. And that also is a create makes us sick. We over amplify, whether it's the victimhood or whether it's the whatever extreme. Why do people call, extremism? If you notice, most people who are very extreme, they tend to take themselves and the issues way too seriously. And if we really work from the heart, we start seeing more the lightness of the world, the lightheartedness, the humor, the beauty, the innocence. So the Middle East and topics related to that is one community that really needs to start shifting its consciousness towards a different story. And they have to understand what role they play into that. Because as long as we point fingers, we're never going to be able to heal ourselves. A teacher can help us heal, but we have to do the work. So somebody can be a mirror or try to show us the light, but it has to be us willing to and understanding the power of being accountable for our own actions, for our own thoughts, for our own even feelings. And that's not easy to do. It's not easy for anybody, not just people from the Middle East. It's really hard for us to look at our dark side. But in order for us to reach the light, we have to look at our dark side.
I agree. And because I am removed from that part of the world, I can really say, without pointing fingers, just say the way things are. The moment we think we are special and above everyone else, and we are the chosen ones, this is when the conflict stays in place for generations and cannot be removed. So again, we really have to look at ourselves and say, why do I think that? Just because of an old book says that? We don't know who wrote that book. Okay, so please, common sense, logic, we are all the same. We come from the same source. Have respect for each other, and peace will come over us individually and as humanity.
Yes, being stuck on a certain ideology does not, first and foremost, does not serve us or the people that we love. And if anything, so many people have been hurt over, and I'm not talking just one particular, I mean, even with regards to whatever religion you that takes up your mind, or even a political ideology, that's become, look at some of the people that people are hurting because they have different beliefs on a political scale. So the fact that somebody can take words or beliefs to that extent, and it's usually coming from an anger that has to do with something inside of them. And then they take it out in a different way. Again, this is why storytelling is so important and spirituality, because there's an aspect of us, oftentimes we say there's people, this is a mental health issue or that's a mental health issue. And to a certain degree, yes, but what about the spiritual issue? We don't need to be smart to have a big heart. Like my mom, she managed our whole home. She gave birth to 12 kids, buried two. She managed her home better than so many CEOs I know today. And it wasn't because of her education. It was because she was a wise woman. And it came from her spirituality, her knowing who she is, and her experience in life, and her connection to her heritage and the elderly that came before her. And so I think this is even more important, the spiritual aspect, because you don't need to be educated to know that you should not hurt somebody else, even an animal or whoever. You don't need an education for that. That's why little kids have so much innocence. You don't need to tell them not to kill anybody, right? They didn't have to go to school to learn that. It's just the innocent part of ourselves that somehow over time, whether through trauma, of ancestral trauma, because sometimes, like for me, my trauma was associated to my land, and I didn't know that until I went through I was involved in Lynn's school, and I was drawn to Lynn V. Andrews through her teachings, her spiritual teachings, which made me look into certain aspects of myself that I would have never dared look into because it was too painful.
And because you mentioned Lynn Andrews' name, let's start with a very important period of your life, maybe 4 years and counting initially, when you took her shamanic course. So, what determined you to do that in the first place, and how it transformed you over the years? And I think you wrote 4 books on the subject.
I did, yes. Well, let's just say it was a Heyoka teaching, which is I got tricked into going into her school. I would not have gotten involved in Lynn's school had I read about it too much because I had no clue what shamanism meant. And I did not even really researched it until the second year in the school. So I came across her teachings through a book that was called Writing Spirit. And I was stuck with a book that I was writing at that time called The Great American Family. It was a true story. It was very political about a woman who was in prison, unjustly imprisoned. And I had spent years researching, and I'm having a hard time focusing on this book. And I remember when I read Writing Spirit. I remember her talking about her teachers who are Native Americans, and she was using words like shamanism, spirit animal, and I thought, what is all this language that she's now Native Americans? I was already connected to that. I already had Native American teachers in my life, so I knew the power of that. But the other words she was using were very foreign to me. But all I know is that the book touched a part of my heart, of my writing soul. So at the end, she said, if you want some literary advice to, schedule a session. So I scheduled a session thinking we're going to talk about my book. She started talking about my upbringing and my past. And I thought, why is this woman talking about this? But she was pressing all these buttons that made me think. And the next thing I know, um, I realized that she was a healer from what she had done through our call, and that she was tapping into an area that I did not want to look at, that was too hurtful, my childhood, some of the abuse that had occurred in an authoritarian regime, which I had swept under the rug because everybody else told me, oh, you were hit by your principal. That's not such a big deal. You know what the nuns did to me? So it was always dismissed. And so I started thinking, oh, I'm making a big deal out of this incident. And then I'm making another big deal out of the second incident. And then I'm also making a big deal of the incident where we had to leave Iraq in secrecy. And all these events would traumatize me as a child. Nobody wanted to give it that language. They just were like, kind of basically get over it attitude. Lynn did not do that. Lynn gave it the attention and the nurturing that it needed. And as a result, I realized there were some wounds that needed to be healed, that I needed to address. The next thing I know, I got involved in her school for the sake of understanding, for the sake thinking that I want to improve myself as a writer. And not too long into her school, I realized like I need to heal aspects of myself so I can be a better woman for myself, for my husband, my children, my community. The writing was just like the topping on the cake. It didn't become the focus anymore. Because we're all here. We're not what we do. I am not I'm a writer, but I'm a human being first and foremost, who has feelings, who has, this is my task in this world and this is my calling. But I had to look at the other aspect of myself, and some aspects that we sometimes sacrifice for the sake of, there's a lot of, in an attempt to succeed, people will sacrifice their whole entire family and say, well, I don't want this guy anymore. I don't want this woman anymore. She's getting in my way. Bye. These children are getting in my way. Whomever is getting in our way. Or they might sacrifice their career because they feel like, well, my husband doesn't really want, we give our power away. And through the school, by the way, it reignited my memory of who I am as a Chaldean, because the teachings, choreographing energy is something that Chaldeans did.
Mhm.
That's why they were given all these labels as astrologers, mathematicians, magicians. They were giving those because they choreographed energy, but they did it for the sake of creating. They were not known as destroyers, they were known as builders. So yes, you can take that energy and use it negatively, but it will give that energy back to you. So, as what we call karma, what, Jesus said, do unto others as you would do unto yourself. Now, this seems like, oh, because you want to be such a good, kind-hearted person. Well, partly, but partly scientifically, if you were to use your energy to hurt others, just energetically, this would go around into a circle that it would come back to you. So that's just, actually, that's really just a scientific aspect of it. And so they were not, again, like destroyers. If you look into their history, they were giving very sophisticated titles. They were known as priests and priestesses. And but again, over time, they were pushed aside. They were looked at, marginalized, demonized even. And so we had to go into hiding for a very long time. And I think through Lynn's school, as I was searching for who I was, I started remembering who I was. And once I started remembering, there was such sadness in me, such sadness. I remember for like a long time, I would like cry at the people, what they had to go through in order to hide who they were, but then the ones that maintained who they were for the sake of, even as they were martyred because of who they are, and the sacrifices they made. But then what brought me back, that's when I was looking at that dark side and the reality of it. But then it's like, okay, not to be attached to that. What are you going to do with that story? I can just be miserable and feel like, oh, yes, we were oppressed, and let's just bury myself in that victimhood story. Or I can communicate with my ancestors and say, how do thank you for the experiences of who you were, for bringing me into this world, and what is my role now? How can I serve? And and you'll hear your ancestors in return saying, preserve our heritage, see and help others, and not for the sake of just preserving it for the sake of like, oh yeah, we're Chaldeans, and like a trophy associated with it, but because we, like the indigenous of other lands, because every land had its indigenous, it wasn't reserved to the Native American people. We have the Chaldeans in Mesopotamia, but we have indigenous people all over the world, because where did we all come from, right? We all came from an
Yeah.
indigenous group. But remembering that and how they lived and how they treated, how they worked with the earth is very important. And the world needs that now. But we have to remember who we were, who we are, in order to make that happen.
Yes, indeed. And if you may share, do you have spirit, or what is your spirit animal? And do you have your own secret garden?
Oh, I definitely have my secret garden. I have several of them actually. And one of them, we my feral cats visit, and they just gave births. And that's one of my gardens. That's in the front yard. My spirit animal, I would say, what came to me was the wolf. And I ended up shortly after my mom passed away with a Shih Tzu. I have I have a painting of a wolf in my library over here, but I think the Shih Tzu was like a miniature because he's my first pet, so I can't bring a wolf. Like I don't know that I'd be able to handle a wolf, so I was given like a miniature wolf.
Yes,
He does
no,
remind me, and he tries to protect me like one. And I've heard him, and I videotaped him howling one
interesting.
time.
Yeah.
I forgot what it was. I think there was the alarm or thing that they put some kind of warning, the warning alarm that's outside. And as they were doing that outside, he was howling like the wolf. So, anyways, that's my spirit man. But the reason there's that connection, wolves, if we were to study animals, they served their community. What they would do is they'd go out into their communities. They gather all the information. They hoard all the information. Then they go and they hibernate, and they utilize it to use it to serve others and to share it with everybody. And I think I kind of tend to do that. Like I'll get these phases where I'm out in the world and talking and being very active. And then I'll get these phases after I've gathered all my research. I'm just stuck in this room basically for most of the part, putting it all together so I can like share it with the world. And then that ends, and then the process reignites and it goes around and around because it never ends. Like, I'll end up dying doing that
Yeah, beautiful.
cycle.
I mean, wolf is one of my spirit animals as well, and is interesting because all my spirit animals gave birth recently, and when I visited last time, they all had babies. So it was a very nice experience. Yes,
Yes, it's
new
such a
beginnings.
blessing.
Yeah, new
It's a
beginnings.
new beginning.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
and when you journey with Lean, your drumming was done in person, was done remotely. How did you journey?
It was both. So I'm at uh, it was a 4 year school that was based, by the way, full time, 4 years. And each year I had a different mentor that worked with me regularly, where I would meet with on a weekly basis and I would turn my work in on a weekly basis. And we created our drums, and I was just such like I was so foreign to this whole teachings that I created this little Arabic drum that was really well. I mean, they said, yeah, yeah, well, it's from your heritage, and they were very patient, knowing how little I understood and knew. And then I started going. We would meet twice a year, and I met with the second gathering. My kids were very young, so I ended up meeting with Lynn until I graduated two times, and she we worked together. One of the times we worked very deeply together, aside from the ones that I did over the phones. And we did a lot of drumming in person. And one of the shamans in the school actually gifted me my first Native American drum, and that's something that I still have. And so it was both. And the reason I was hesitant, I remember when I was offered the idea of joining her school, the reason I was hesitant is because I thought, well, how would this energy work given we would have to do this online over the phone? To me, I was suspicious of that. Previously, my Native American teachers, it was such an opposite experience. It was very intimate. It was in a home with my Native American teacher and his woman partner, Susan, Chip and Susan. His name is Charles. And it was in their home with two students. And a weekly lab that where other students would, your previous students would come. So imagine going from a two, it was for 8 months, and it was also like a full-time type of study. But imagine going from a two-student in person in somebody's home to going to something online, and there was so many students that we from all over the world that we would connect to during the calls and such. So it was a totally different experience. But it also was an experience where I did realize the energy does have that kind of power. The energy you can just anywhere you're at from, it's a different experience in person, of course, but that there's so much power that you can heal people or create a healing or do something from thousands of miles away. And as I mentioned earlier, I do believe that it was due to our ancestors and the spirit of our ancestors that we ended up moving into a land that allows for our stories to continue. I don't think this was coincidental at all. Where we are in a land that we can continue our stories and we don't have to be in hiding anymore.
Yeah, very interesting. And when during these journeys, was drumming the only enhancement that you use, or sacred plant medicine was also used?
No, it was there was nothing that we used that was taken into our system because it was just like rattles and drums, things like that.
And how do you apply these days these teachings to your normal day-to-day life in your writing, in your movies? And if you can mention the four books you wrote about this shamanic experience, what do they portray?
Well, I have a four-part memoir series. It's called Healing Wisdom for a Wounded World, and it goes through each year that I was in the school. And it's actually I caught the main teachings of each year and incorporated and talks with me and Lynn, talks with me and my mentors, and they all, by the way, knew of the process that I am documenting everything. So they were all on board and actually my mentors could care less. They're such amazing women that two of them have since passed, but they were ones that you would just, if you were to see them, you would they never looking for any attention or anything like that. And so they did their part, but in the books, I document the important teachings that were very practical and can be utilized by basically anybody, even if they're not. Like I have classes now I'm an ambassador for the Authors Guild, and I have classes where I share one of the most basic teachings, which is going around the wheel. And going around the wheel, it's a sacred wheel, not a medicine wheel, but it's so I share this. I was invited to somebody's home last week where I shared how you use the wheel. And I did wheels for 4 years. I did weekly wheels, daily wheels, yearly wheels. And when you do a wheel, you kind of start understanding how the world works and how we have the four directions, the south, the west, the north, the east, and how those four directions are associated with you personally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, and how when you go around those four wheels, you are creating a balanced life. You're not neglecting any aspect of yourself. By looking at this wheel and addressing all these aspects, you staying centered. You learn how to stay centered as things are like thrown at you. Creating Doing the film was very challenging, very, very challenging. I mean, I can, like, right now I'm speaking about it like, yeah, we did this film. It was a very challenging situation. Imagine this is the first Iraqi American feature film, narrative film. It was and it's being led by a woman. And thanks to a lot of the amazing men that really had my back in this, whether, our producer, our executive producer, our cinematographer, editor, these men that stayed with me. I mean, the actresses did their part in the beginning, but the men that were involved in this project really had my back to make sure that I finish it. Because shooting a film and getting is one thing, but getting a distributor and getting it to the next phase where now it's available in 25 countries and streaming in so many different channels, that takes that consistency. But it's staying centered. There's something that we used to do also at least twice a year, but Lynn would advised, even quarterly, but it's called the Act of Power. So I do classes on that. I do a lot of workshops around the Acts of Power, especially for writers. And that requires a little bit more. It's kind of like a New Year's resolution, but it's more seasonal rather than like once a year type of thing, although it's very, very popular around like the end of December, January. These are some of the more basic teachings that I do regularly, but then I work on a deeper level when it's, whether if I'm working one-on-one or I'm having retreats or specific classes. Of course, those kind of things require a deeper experience. But you have to do so much inner work for your projects to manifest and to manifest in ways that are with integrity. I know there's a lot of young people, and not necessarily, it's not just about being young, but there's a lot of people that are just very impatient where, they go to a workshop or they experience something in another country that's very profound. And the next thing they want to do is teach it. I remember I used to be so excited about what I was learning and how it was affecting my life. And I would say, oh my gosh, I want to, I had all these ideas to whether it's to start a class or to do this. And I remember my mentors would say, whoa, just don't do nothing. Don't don't go out there, don't do nothing. You need to work on yourself. And I thought, no, but look at what I'm doing and look what just happened. And they said, no, stop. You're
Integrate
not,
first. Yeah.
don't do anything. They knew, they were so wise. And you know what? They were wise, but so was I because I listened to them.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, they just jump, they want to jump into the next level. They don't want to pay their dues. And I knew, I'm going to have to pay my dues to get where I'm trying to get. And you have to finish with yourself first, and even though we're never finished, but you have to finish through a certain process before you can start sharing or making it yourself available for others to do it. And I think that's something, it's probably just the speed of how this generation is happening, where everything is kind of a bigger speed. And that's okay. But we have to realize, like, I could say my family right now, I mean, my kids are older, but in the beginning, I could have tried to detach from those responsibilities to make certain things happen. But do you know what I had to do the first year of my school, 2012? That was the first year. I was working on a feature script. I had it. I had a beautiful feature script. It was different than Pomegranate. And I had individuals who were in the film industry that wanted to work with me. But no matter what I was trying to do, I wasn't able to get the investors. I wasn't able to move it forward. And my mentor said to me, it might not be the right time. Your kids are very small. Just give it away. And I thought, is she crazy? I have a great script. I have a producer that wants to work. She's telling me to. And with tears coming down my eyes, I lit a fireplace and I took the script. Of course, I have it on my files too. So it wasn't the but I had to symbolically let it go. And little by little, I just threw it into the fire and gave it away. And I trusted that the universe, I just gave it away knowing that my attachment was probably blocking it, that it wasn't the time. I gave it away. It hurt me, but since then I completed a feature documentary and then I completed Pomegranate. And I was able to do so without getting a divorce and without, divorcing my children through their teenage years when they were not at their nicest. Because I understood I had to let go of the attachment and I had to be okay with time. That's another thing. When you're choreographing energy, you start looking at time differently. So many attachments, I think, fell off. And then you just your perception changes, and then you're not led by fear, but you're led by understanding.
Yes, yeah, it's beautiful. And going back for a second to the shamanic years and experience, have you done a sweat lodge during this time as well?
I did. The best sweat lodge that I did was when I was in Mexico in 2016. It was before my first book came out, and I was it was the traditional type. And I remember when we were inside, there was seven of us, and they said, you know, it's gonna get very dark, and if at some point you want to leave, let us know, but we ask that you please try to stay through it. So I thought, oh, I'm not gonna. But I did have that experience where I was like, I'm gonna raise my hand. I am not gonna go through this. But I held off. And in that most darkness of darkness moment, I realized that I was looking at something that I really didn't until finally there was a struggle. There was an inward struggle in my mind until when I decided like, no, I'm not gonna break this, you know. Plus, I don't want to be the only, that situation. You don't want to be the only loser kind of person like asking to step out. And I saw what I needed to see as I allowed myself to go past my fear. And I think, and my fear was that I was gonna release this book, and that is that gonna be okay? It hit me that I'm gonna really be revealing myself in a way that before I was just being like, oh yeah, I'm passing on these teachings and this is so great. And within that, I realized, well, maybe this is revealing myself to the public. And um, that sweatshop, that experience was for me to look into that and be okay with it and walk out. And so when I released that gift into the universe, I had the confidence and the trust of the universe, and I was okay with it. So it was something that I was able to celebrate.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you for sharing. And yes, for me, the first two sweats were quite hard, but the third and the fourth were much, much easier. I was able to release my voice. And yeah, I mean, for the first 30 minutes, I thought I'm going to die. But after that, everything was piece of cake pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it did feel it was very challenging, but it was very rewarding. And I have to credit, I'm remembering my husband. So my husband, like me, is Chaldean, and he was born like me in the Middle East. And I have to give him credit for being supportive. His way of support is just allowing me to be myself. So when I went to it and my kids were playing, there was like areas for them to play in, and he was with them. And when I stepped out, they were there, um, to kind of to welcome me. I said, "Oh, how did you guys end up here?" He said, "Well, we just came to check on you. We didn't know like you disappeared, and here you are." Um, I have to be very grateful for that. I think it's also part of why I love what I do. Again, Middle Eastern people are so stereotyped, and we don't get to see the men that support their women, and we don't get to see the women who are not in a victimhood state. All my years, I've been asked by publishers and producers to focus on honor killing and the very stories that are very harmful to us, not because they do happen. It's not that I'm trying to deny that they happen, but what about the other version of ourselves that never gets to be seen? And being part of Lynn's school, who she focuses, although there were some men in the school over the years, but it was mostly women, but she does her teachings do come from a feminine aspect of shamanism. That was something that I truly needed in my life, to look past, to look into our heritage, and to discover the Mesopotamian goddesses. By the way, I have a book called Mesopotamian Goddesses that is all these goddesses that were from ancient Mesopotamia. Did you know that at that time, thousands of years ago, that the king had to be initiated into kinghood through a goddess? Okay, imagine right now, the region right now where women have to veil themselves, a male had to be initiated through the feminine. and there was gods and goddesses in order to create the like balance of energies. And there was there's Ishtar and Inanna, and there was the goddess of medicine, and then there was a goddess of beer, and there was all, and each one of them was designated a job. The title that was given was an honorary title, but they all believed in one supreme being. And this is where the what I try to show in my work is the misconceptions about these teachings, these ancient teachings. They did believe in a supreme, but they gave certain titles, just like right now we give congressman, congresswoman, and each one has a job depending on her or his region, right? Same thing in ancient Mesopotamia. They had certain jobs in different parts of the regions, and they were, rather than it just being specific towards the region, it was specific towards the wind, the sea, the beer, which at that time was considered healthier than water. And so they designated a goddess who had all these priestesses that would brew fresh beer every day and pass it around. And where's all these beautiful stories that we don't, these are important stories. The wheel was invented in that region. And so in this country, I'm able, thank God, a million times to share these stories with the West, just like the West is sharing their stories with me.
Yes, and
There's a mutual respect, and I totally love that.
yes, yes, thank you. And you mentioned water. Do you have a spiritual relationship with water?
I do have a relationship with water. I know, I mean, a lot of my communication, the first time I decided that, or I understood my calling to be a writer, was I was in Puerto Rico in Condado Beach looking at the ocean, and it was like, okay, you're gonna write books, and you're gonna write a lot of books. I can say that about it, and there's a lot of communication that happens in the process. But I also have a lot with fire. A lot of the ceremonies that I do, especially in the winter, is you just, with the fireplace and giving away what no longer serves me. Water can also be used for that, but I feel like water is more the messages of future situations, whereas the fire is more, I feel like it's the past or the giveaway.
Yes, interesting. And William, if someone wants to contact you and work with you, how do they do that?
Well, they can visit my page. It's basically my first and last name. And they will find, and there's a tab that says services, and then they can see if they want to. Yeah, and I do, I'm gonna say regarding my work with people is that it's centered. I use writing a lot and spirituality for the person, not whether they're writers or not, but to transform as a person first and foremost. And when you transform as a person, naturally your writing goes into a whole higher level.
Yes, thank you. And I don't want to end the interview without asking you a conspiracy theory question. So there are rumors that the USA invaded Iraq, not necessarily to spread the democracy. We know that was a lie, not necessarily for the resources, but also to get access to certain artifacts from the Museum of History, such as a portal like we see in the science fiction movie. Is there any truth in that statement?
Well, there might be, I don't know if that was a main reason. I know like there's a lot of oil there that they benefited from. I know that it was a very unjust reason to invade Iraq because none of the terrorists were Iraqi. And I visited Iraq in 2000, and one thing, even though we fled Iraq for several reasons, being minority Christian, being not non-Ba'athist, which was the regime of Saddam Hussein. But I can tell you when I was there in 2000, when Iraq was under sanctions, Saddam was anti-terrorists, anti-extremists, Women were not even allowed to veil because he was suspicious of them. So he was against all of that. So it was an unjust war, and I believe it was started for different reasons. And I have heard where there was also the desire to get closer to that region to make that region more like of a touristic area and everything. Um, so so having said that, that it was an unjust war, and I don't believe that they went in because of like Iraq was not a threat, and there were no terrorists in there that the U.S. needed to be afraid of. But it's been over 20 years, and this is the aspect that I feel like the Middle East has to at some point take accountability for their lifestyle. And Iraq has not become any better since his absence. And the women have not had any better life. I mean, the things that are going on in January of this year, a law was passed to allow 9-year-old girls to get married. Yes.
Mm.
So at some point, so the intentions were false, you know. I think most people probably will agree to that at this point. And Iraq is filled with such richness, such beauty, such I I would pray, and I pray for Iraq one day that they will use their resources and their intelligence and their heritage in a way that is a blessing for all for them, you know.
Yeah.
And I think there's a possibility in that, you know, that I really do, but I do pray that that happens. And I know that in the meantime, anybody from that background to understand the power of the West, that we can share our stories and the richness of our heritage while we're in the West.
Yes, thank you. And we're at the end of this wonderful discussion. Any final words?
Well, final words, I think, is just, you know, I really appreciate this opportunity to share my heritage, and I hope and pray that it inspires others to look into theirs.
Thank you very much. Good luck with your next movie, your next book, and any other shamanic initiative. Thank you.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
God bless you too. And
Bye-bye.
for my viewers, thank you for watching. Share it, leave a comment, visit the links I mentioned at the beginning of the interview. And until next time, love and gratitude.